Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome to the PivotBoss Closing Report. I'm Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss, with analysis after the recent session on April 12th, 2016. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. You can see price continues to chop around our friendly HVN. We talked about 2061s. This is something we knew about way back when prices were down here at 1800s. We talked about the likelihood of price rallying into 2061 and then becoming stuck in mud. And we're seeing that effect right now. Every single day, it's a run of the stops in one direction or the other, and sometimes two or three directions. You see a wave up, a wave down, a wave up, a wave down, a wave up and down, a wave up and down, and then a wave up. So you can see there's lots of chop going on in here, and it's not likely to stop. So while the current uptrending market remains intact, bulls are still defending pullbacks for a shot at seeing further strength ahead. I would say right now you got to watch the edges for fading new highs and fading new lows right now, because any push above this zone here, above the previous month's high, has been rejected so far, and that could lead to another reversal in the upcoming session. If price gets down here into 2020s, that could be fodder for a reversal back up until this range is ready to see expansion. So there could be more of the same. And the way a narrow range continues to develop is by widening the range a little bit. That means it has to run the stops out a little bit in order to widen out that range so that the market can continue to facilitate trade in this area. So again, not a super actionable area here. We talked about pre-market how a pullback could be a selling opportunity for a continuation lower. But after prices were rejected early on at around 41s, price returned back to the lows, and then we saw some big time strength. So in the trading room, we changed our mind about the 49s and actually forecasted for price to push higher into 53.5 and beyond. So we were on the money in the trading room once things started to heat up, but that was a swing opportunity that we were looking for today, but it just did not play out. So far, still holding here to see how this thing materializes, but eventually we should see expansion that could be fairly significant. Now, if we take a look at the intraday time frame, this is what we talked about this morning. So price came up. Here's the overnight highs. We were looking for prices to push higher into 49s for a shot at selling. However, when price first came into, after the open, came into overnight highs, it was immediately rejected. And right there, that set the tone for a little bit of a different day. We saw the sell imbalances pile up on lows, which helped us identify that a squeeze could be on the way, and that definitely ensued. Once that squeeze got underway, we were looking for not only a push into 5-day V-pocket 49s, but a rotation into and beyond the previous month's close. So we were looking for a move between 56.5 and 53.75. We completed that move, and basically that just kind of shows what we've been seeing in the market in general. Back and forth, a lot of trading range activity here. We're likely to see the same. So watch overnight trading. If price gets into this area and can't see acceptance or doesn't see follow through, we could be looking at a move all the way back to the bottom of the range. All right, let's take a look at crude oil. Crude oil has been significantly bullish. This is one of the most bullish swings we've seen in quite a while. And right now, it all kind of came about on the squeeze right here off of the previous month's close. Remember, that's where I mentioned bears were looking to defend. They did defend, but down here, bulls defended the lows, and eventually that paved the way for a huge squeeze. Anytime you see a major squeeze like that against a significant pivot, the stops come out. And that's why we said we could be looking at a continuation into the high. 42.49 is going to be very, very important. There's significant resistance there, as we saw the major rejection before. But I told you earlier that if we're going to push down and test this 35 level and form a higher low here, the expectation could be for a continuation higher. And in the trading room, we were looking at 47.92 as being the next major swing high target should prices get above 42.49. And basically, that's the HVN up there. So this HVN was defended. It went bid, came back, was defended. Now price is pushing through these series of little nodes here, and that could lead to a continuation into the next HVN above, which is 47.92. Now, based on the current month's range or current week's range, you can see right here that we're already at the primary target for the week based on the week's lows. So look for a continuation higher, perhaps into 43.35 and 44.38 as prices look to continue to push toward the average of its weekly range. Okay, now looking at the intraday time frame, after you get a big time move like this, look how significant that move was. If you look at daily range here, this is average daily range. You can see it's kind of ticking up after this move up. We've been averaging $1.67 of range after today's session, and today's range was $2.16, basically 129% of average daily range. So when you see that, it's pretty significant, and anytime you see that, the expectation would likely be that you form either a digestion range or consolidation the upcoming day, basically to digest that recent move, or you see more of a pullback. And given that strength has been seen this entire time, significant strength at that, the expectation would likely be for a test above the highs and then a rotation lower, and then for price to be either digested on these highs or for pullbacks to be defended, at least until price tests that 42.50. Now, here's something interesting. This is the expansion targets. That's the 25% PivotBoss pivot. Here's the 50. That's the 75, and that's the 100%. So that was today's high was exactly 100% of yesterday's range. That's what it was. So from the previous session's high to the upside, we saw a perfect 100% move. And additionally, you can see how price traded basically around each of these pivots in some form or fashion the entire way. That's why we love these PivotBoss pivots. Now, let's take a look at the gold contract. We talked about late last week that we could see a squeeze coming, especially right here. We talked about it last Friday, and I mentioned kind of this rounded off pattern. And I said, you know what, we might see a push into 65, 60 to 75s. And so far, we've seen that come to life very, very nicely this week. The early pullback was defended as well. This doesn't look like a topping pattern to me just yet. I think that price wants to test back above 65s and 70s to see if there's any renewed interest above that area. Otherwise, we could be looking at another rotation back down within the range. So I think we're starting to get into that zone where we're starting to get a little toppy up here. And then we have to see and judge how price responds in this price zone, because any rejections opens up a move back downward. Okay, taking a look at the NQ. The NQ here saw a significant push to the downside early on that really outpaced the ES and crude oil, and then it saw a bounce right off the 25% daily PivotBoss pivot, and then saw a push right back to the previous session's midpoint. A huge move, a previous week's midpoint, that is, a huge, huge move. And so far, prices continue to hold within this range. So prices were tested below the previous range here and then snapped right back up. That implies a move back up in the range, and we likely test the highs, at which point we could just snap right back and continue to widen this range and trade out. So just keep that in mind. Pullbacks into the previous week's close, 44.67, could offer a short-term buying opportunity back up. Once you get into the above 45.23, you got to be careful up here, as it could lead to another rotation downward. On an intraday basis, you can see right here, this was really significant the way this thing played off. But we saw a push downward through our 44.41. We were very, very confident about that level opening up weakness. And it did. You know, it pushed down through that level, dropped down into 26.5, and then just held. And one thing we noticed on the intraday was how the failed lower low was significant. And that was, right away what had us believing that we could see a squeeze, especially if that squeeze came with a divergence on the PivotBoss oscillator, and it did. So right here you can see a low right on the 25% daily PivotBoss pivot. Here is the failed lower low, and then price immediately snapped back above that area. That was a quick move back to value. Price came down, tried to hold below 44.41, made it support instead, and then the squeeze was on. That's how that thing played out, and it was significant. Now again, the previous week's close is right here, 44.68. Overall, a pullback into that area could offer a buying opportunity for a continuation higher. But if there's any push up first and a rejection first, then it's probably heading back down to support for a retest. Now, one more thing, important note here. If anybody's interested in knowing about the upcoming 6-week live training session for PivotBoss Masters, you can join me tomorrow. I'll be coming on and doing a live Q&A for PivotBoss Masters at noon Central, Wednesday, noon Central. So you can join me at the Join Me link, which is PivotBoss. All right, that's it for now. Let's see how this thing plays out the rest of the week.